Hello guys, welcome to the next session of developing e-commerce application from scratch using Angular and Spring Boot. In the last session we discussed on how we can create these show product detail component and how we can show all the product details that we have with the help of this Angular material table. But if you see in the last session we just shown this text information like product name, description, discounted price and actual price, but alongside we have the product images as well. So in this session we are going to see how we can show all the product images to the admin. So what basically we are going to do is we are just going to add one button over here. Let's suppose that will be something like show images button, and when someone will click on the button we are going to show one dialog, or we can say that pop-up to the admin, and then with the help of that pop-up we are going to show all the images. So for this I'm just going to use Angular material dialog. So if you see when we click on any open dialog button we are getting the pop-up. So on this pop-up we can show any information. In our case I'm just going to show the images. So without wasting much more time, let me just take you to the Visual Studio Code and let me just show you how we can implement this functionality. So the very first thing that we have to do is we have to add one more column over here, and we have to add one more icon over here. So let me just do that thing. So let me just go to the VS Code, and over here let me just go to the show product detail component TS that we have previously created, and then over here on line number 14 we have one array of displayed columns. So we have to add one more column over here. So I'm just going to add this particular column after the actual price. So I'm just going to add, let's suppose, images as a column, and rest will be the same. Now we have to do similar thing in the HTML file as well. So let me just go to the HTML file, and then over here we have this actual price column. So we have to add one more container for the images as well. So let me just copy the same container code and let me just paste it after the product's actual price, and make sure you are just keeping the sequence in mind because sequence matters a lot. And then let me just give the heading as images, and then let me just give the column definition as images, and let me just go to the TS because column definition should match the name that we have used over here. So over here we have used images, exactly same name that we have to use for the mat column definition as well. So make sure you are not doing any spelling mistakes over here. And then the next thing that we have to do is we have to add one image button. So for this what we can do is we can just copy this button code. It is basically nothing but a icon button that we have used for edit and delete. So we can just do similar thing, and then let me just paste it for the images like this. Now over here we have to give the icon name. So let me just try the images as icon name. I'm not sure whether it is image or images. Let me just check, and maybe we can check on the Google's site as well. So now if you just refresh we are getting these images icon. So now if you just want to check all the images, then you can just hit the Google fonts site, and on the Google font site you will get the images or icons, whatever you say. So we can just click on the icons, and then whatever icon you want you can just search that icon. In my case I just want images as icon. So whatever icons which are related to the images, all the icons you will get over here, and then you have to just copy the name from this, and then you can just paste it in between the code. So as of now images is working perfectly fine for me, so I will just keep it as it is. And then the next thing that we have to do is we have to add the click event on this button. So let me just come back to the Google Chrome. So what I want basically is whenever I will click on this button, I just want to open a dialog, and then on the dialog we can show the images. So now let's see how we can use this dialog and all. So now let me just come back to the VS Code. Over here the next thing that we have to do is we have to add the click event. So for this click event, so we have used a click event for the delete button as well. So similar click event we have to use, and then for this we have to call one method. So before calling any method or creating any method, let me just come back to the Google Chrome and let me just go back to the documentation of Angular material dialog. So over here, if you see into a overview, you will see all the information like what is Angular material dialog exactly. And similarly, you can just you will be able to see some of the methods which are related to the Angular material dialog. So we have the open dialog method, and then we have the close dialog method as well. And similarly, we have few more information that is needed to use the Angular material dialog. So over here, I'm not interested in the overview. I'll just quickly go to the examples, and then we can decide like which example we want to use. So we have a couple of examples over here. So we have this big dialog. So let me just see what is the code of it, and let me just go to the TS file. So over here, if you see it is pretty straightforward, but I just want one dialog where I can pass the information as well, because if you see like we have all the product images, and like from our this particular show product detail component, we have to pass the images to the dialog. So this is the functionality that we want to implement, because then and only then we will be able to show those images on the dialog. So that is the thing that we need. So let me just try out the correct example in our case. So now if you see, we have one dialog which is like injecting data when opening a dialog, and if you just see the code, so we have this HTML code. Similarly, we have the TypeScript code, and over here if you see, like whenever we are opening a dialog, we are passing the information as well. So from from our component, we are passing the information to the dialog, and this is the functionality that we want exactly in our code. So I'm just going to use this particular example, like injecting data when opening a dialog. So let me just quickly show you how we can do this. So for this, what we have to do is we have to first of all create one component. So that component will act as a model, or maybe we can say that a dialog. So let me just first of all create a component, and let me just go back to the VS Code. Let me just open the terminal, and let me just stop the current execution, and let me just use npm run ng-gc, and then maybe what we can say that show product images dialog, show product images dialog component. So let me just create one more component for this, and the component is created. The next thing that we have to do is we have to create one function. So let me just create one function which is called as a open dialog, or maybe we can say that which is called as a show images function. So let me just create it. So on my images button, let me just add one click event, and it will be a method like show images. And as of now, I'm just passing my entire element to this function. So if you see, this element will basically hold the information of entire row, and if you just want to send the information of entire row, we can just use element, or else if you want to send the any specific property, then we can pass it like element dot product actual price or element dot product discounted price. So if you want to access any specific property, we can access it with the help of dot operator. Otherwise the element will contain the information of entire row, so we can use it as it is. So as of now, I'm just going to pass the entire element, and now let me just save this code, and this function we have to create in a TS file. So let me just come back to the TS file, and over here inside my TS file, let me just add this function. So after this delete product, let me just add this function, and instead of the element, let me just make it as a product, because obviously that row contains the product object itself. So let me just use a product like this, and now our function is done. So let me just do one thing. Let me just use console.log, and let me just console the product details that we are receiving from that click. So next thing that we have to do is we have to just save it, and let me just start my application like npm run start, and let me just wait till my application starts. Meanwhile, I'm just going to the Google Chrome and I'm just opening the console, and then let me just see whether my application is started. Yes, it is started. And now what I can just do is I can just click on this button. Let's see what we get on the console. So as of now, I'm just not getting anything on the console. Let me just refresh this, and now let me just click on it. Yes, now we are getting everything on the console. Whenever we are clicking on these images button, for example, I clicked on the iPhone 7, so we are getting all the information of the iPhone 7 itself. So alongside we are getting the product images as well, and this is these are the images that we want to show on the model. So these are the images that we want to pass to the model. So that's why I was looking for the example to passing the information from component to the model. So this is the requirement that we have right now. The next thing that we have to do is we have to open a dialog. So let me just show you how we can do this as well. So now to open a dialog, it is very simple. Let me just go to the TS file. Over here, if you see, we have to just first of all inject these mat dialog. But before injecting these, the very first thing that we have to do is we have to import its module. So make sure, like whenever we are using any Angular material library for the very first time, then we have to inject, or not inject, but we have to import its module. So we are going to use this dialog very first time in our project, so that's the reason we have to import it. So now let me just copy this import line, which is import mat dialog module from angular / material / dialog. And now let me just come back to the VS Code and let me open app.module.ts file. Let me just paste this mat dialog module import line, and let me just copy this library name or maybe class name, whatever you say, and let me just paste it inside my imports array as well, like this. And now let me save it. And the next thing that we have to do is we have to kill the current running instance of the application, because whenever we import any new module, then make sure you are just killing the running instance of the application and then you start the new instance. So let me just kill the terminal. The next thing that we have to do is we have to write these particular lines. So let me again go back to the examples and let me just go to the TS. And over here now we have to do is we have to just inject public dialog mat dialog. So we have to just inject it. So let me similarly inject mat dialog. So over here inside my constructor, let me just use public. You can make it private, but as of now let's use public, which is similar to the given into the example of mat dialog on official site. So let's use public, and then maybe we can just use images dialog, which will be of type mat dialog, like this. And then next thing that we have to do is we have to just call the open method. So open method basically takes two different parameters. The very first parameter it takes is a component that we want to open, and the next parameter it takes is the data that we want to pass. So first of all, let's use a component itself. Second parameter is optional, so because data can be passed or cannot be, so second parameter is optional, but first parameter is a compulsory mandatory parameter. So let me just come back to the VS Code, and over here inside my show images, let me just use this dot images dialog, then open, and then we have to pass a component name. So my component name is show product images dialog component, like this. And now let me just give the semicolon. Now let me just save it and let me just start my application. Let's see whether we are able to get any dialog or not, or whatever we are getting exactly. Let's see how it is looking like right now. So let me just wait till my application starts, and then we can just verify on the Google Chrome. Now application is started. Let me just go back to the Google Chrome. Let me just refresh it, and then let me just try to click on the images. Now if you see, whenever I'm just clicking on the images, we are getting one pop-up, or maybe we can say that dialog, and it is just showing the default message that whenever we create any new component, whatever Angular gives us the default message, it is showing that message. And when we click on the outside of the dialog is getting disappeared. So this is the exact functionality that we want. The next thing that we have to do is we have to show the images on these dialog, and then what we have to do is we have to increase its height and width as well. So we have to like make these dialog little big so that it will look more beautiful. So let me just show you how we can do this as well. So for height and width we have few parameters. So let me just quickly try to take those parameters. So if you just go to the overview, maybe over here, if you see, like we have this height and width as well. So over here, let me just come back to the VS Code and let me just give a semicolon, and then let me just give a curly bracket. Inside the curly bracket you can just give a height. So let me just give a height of, let's suppose, 500 pixel. We have to give it in a single quotes like this, and let me just give a width of, maybe let's suppose, a 800 pixel. I'm just giving some random values. Let's see how it looks, and let me just save it. So now, yes, it is looking quite good. So as of now, I'll just keep it as it is. If you want, you can just try like whatever screen size you have, you can just try it in that way. So as of now, I'm just going to keep it as it is. The next thing that we have to do is we have to pass our images to this dialog. But now over here we have one twist. So now let me just try to open my console and let me just try to clear it. And now let me just click on the images, and now we are able to see all the product details on the console. Now if you see inside these product images, what we have is we have as of now we have only one image, but if you see, we have some different properties of the images. So we have the ID, which is 16, then we have the name, which is image3.jpeg, and then we have the pic bytes. So pic byte is nothing but a picture bytes, or maybe you can say that image bytes, and then we have its type as well. So for the type we have image/jpeg. The main thing that we are interested in this pic byte. So over here we cannot show these pic byte as images directly. So what we have to do is we have to first of all take these pic bytes, we have to convert it into a file or blob, and then with the help of blob we have to create its URL, and then with the help of that URL we have to show all the images on the screen. So this is the process that we want to follow. So very first thing is we have to take this pic byte and then we have to convert it into a file or blob. After converting it into a file or blob, we have to create its URL, and then with the help of that URL we have to show all the product images on the like screen. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create one service which is called as image processing service. That image processing service will contain some common functions which will help me out to do this conversion. So the reason why I'm just going to create a service is because like this particular functionality is like showing product images will be used in many different components. So I want one common service which will contain the common functions, so that in whichever component I may require, I may just call inject that service and call those functions, so that it will be very easy for me. So let's see how we can do this particular thing as well. And now what we have to do is we have to just come back to the VS Code again, and we have to create a service as well. So now let me just stop the application. Let me just use npm run nggs, and maybe let me just give the name as image processing service like this. Let me just wait. Yes, service is created. So now inside this particular service we have to create some functions. So let me just show you how we can create those functions as well. So for this I'm just going to create one public function which is something like create images. So let me just use public create images like this, and this create images function will take one parameter which will be of type product. So let me just use product, which will be of type product. So over here the intention is this for this create images function we have to pass one product. So this create images function will take one product and process all the images which resides into the product, and it will return us the updated product object. So this is the intention behind it. The next thing that we have to do is, first of all, we have to take all the images which are present into a product object, or maybe you can say that product JSON, whatever it is. So let me just use product images, and we have to store it into one variable. Let's suppose const product images like this. These product images will be an array of any type. So as of now I'm just keeping it as any. And then what next thing that we have to do is we have to create one array. So we have to create array of like file handle. So the reason why I'm just using a file handle is, so file handle is the interface that we have previously created, and throughout the application I just want to keep it consistent. So if you are not sure like when we have created a file handle, so let me just show you how we have created. So let me just first of all create the array like product images to file handle. So file handle is basically interface that we have created. It is not like inbuilt interface or something like this. So I will just show you its definition as well. And let me just initialize it with the empty array. Now let me just open this file handle. So now if you see, the file handle is basically contains one file. It is an actual file, and it contains one URL, which is nothing but a URL of this particular file. So it is basically easy. So we can just when we created the URL, then with the help of this URL we can just show images to anywhere on the screen that we want. So that is the reason I have created this file handle. The next thing that we have to do is we have to first of all iterate over the images. So we have to just use a for loop. So let me just use for, and let me just use let I is equals to 0. I should be less than product images dot length, and then we have to just use I plus plus like this. And then the next thing that we have to do is we have to next thing that we have to do is like we have to just access the specific image. So with the help of this index we have to access a specific image. So let me just keep it in one variable like product images of I, and let me just use const image file data. So image file data will contain all the like data like ID, then its name, its type, and its picture byte as well. Now from this image file data we have to convert it into a file. So let me just show you how we can do this as well. So for this let me just create one more function which will be like something like, let's suppose, public data URI to blob. So this function, what this function will do is it will just take the picture bytes and then it will create it to the blob. So for this it will just basically take two different parameters. First of all, let's suppose data URI, or maybe you can say that picture bytes. So you can say that picture bytes, and the next parameter it will take is it will take image type. So what image type we have, like do we have JPEG or do we have PNG? So that image type it will take. The next thing that it will do is it will just call one function which is window dot atop, and then it will just take our picture byte. So let me just use pic byte like this, and then whatever it will return, it will just basically return one byte string. So let me just store it inside a byte string like this. The next thing that we have to do is we have to create one array buffer from this byte string. So let me just create const array buffer is equals to new array buffer, and what will be the length of this array buffer is it will be something like byte string dot length like this. And now once array buffer is created, the next thing that we have to do is we have to create the uint8 array buffer from this array buffer. So it might be like bit confusing, but as of now you can just type it as it is, and at the end you will get to know every single thing. So let me just use const int8 array is equals to new uint8 array, and again we have to just pass array buffer like this. The next thing that we have to do is we have to just use a for loop so that we can iterate over these array that we have just created, like int8 array. So we have to just use for loop let I is equals to 0, I should be less than byte string dot length, and let me just use I plus plus like this. And then what we have to just do is we have to just use byte string dot char code at, and then we have to pass the index like this, and whatever it will return we have to just store it inside the int8 array of ith index like it. So it is basically doing is like it is iterating over the byte string array and it is accessing the single character, or maybe say that a single byte which is present into the picture byte, and then it is just storing it into our int8 array. Now from this int8 array, once all the processing is done, we have to finally create one blob. So let me just create new blob, and then again for the blob we have two different parameters. So very first parameter is blob part. So blob part is nothing but int8 array, and make sure you are just using this square bracket for this int8 array. And then the next thing that we have to pass is a type. So my type will be nothing but a image type. So whatever image type I will receive, I will just use that type as it is. And finally it will just create one blob for me. So let me just store it inside one variable like const blob, and at the end let me just return this particular blob like this. And now let me just save it. So now our data URI to blob function is done. The next thing that we have to do is we have to just call this function from our create images function. So over here inside a for loop, like what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to call this particular function like this dot data URI to blob, and again it requires two different parameters. First one is a picture byte, so let me just use image file data dot pic bytes comma image file data dot type like this. And let me just first of all check these spellings and all. So let me just go to the Google Chrome, and I think I have stopped the execution of the application. So let me just use npm run start, because over here using the correct names is really very important, because like if you missed anything into these names, then you will get all the errors and all. So let me first of all recheck this for the safer side. Let me just go to the Google Chrome and let me just refresh the application. Let me click on the images, any image, and on the console we are getting the image details. So for this what we have picture byte, so pic byte for the bytes and type for the type. So these particular names exactly same we have to use in this place as well. So in this place again, if you see, I done the mistake. over here I used a pick bytes, but in actual it is a pick byte. So that is the reason we have to verify it again and again. So now whatever it will return, I'm just going to store it in one variable, which is image blob, like this. And now from this image blob, what we have to do is we have to again create one file, and then we have to create we have to create a file, and then from this file we have to create its URL as well. So first of all, let's create one file. So let me just use new file, and again it will take parameters. So very first parameter it will take is its image blob. So again, make sure you are just using the rounded not a rounded, square brackets for this image blob. The next thing that it will take is it will take the name. So we have to use image file data dot name, and again you can just verify, like for the name we have the name key itself, so we have to just use a name. And then the next thing that we have to do is we have to pass its type. So for the type we have to use the curly bracket, and then we have to just pass a type is equals to image file data dot type, like this. And then whatever file it will return, we have to just use one variable to store that particular file. So let me just use image file is equals to new file, like this. And now finally our file is created. Now from this particular file we have to create its URL. So basically we have to create one file handle object, or maybe you can say that we have to use this particular interface to structurize our URL and file. So we have to just use const final, any name that you can give, final file handle is equals to, or first of all let me just give the type, which will be of type file handle is equals to, and then we have to give this curly bracket. So very first parameter that it basically requires is it requires a file. So let me just give a file, and my file will be nothing but my image file that I just created. And then the second parameter that it requires is a URL. So URL is nothing but the URL of my image file. So for this, to create an URL, I'm just going to use a DOM sanitizer. So we have to inject the DOM sanitizer. So let me just use private sanitizer, which will be of type DOM sanitizer, like this. And then for this URL we have to just use this dot sanitizer dot, and then we have one function, something like bypass security trust URL. We have to call this particular function. This particular function again take one parameter. So for this we have to pass window dot URL dot create object URL, and finally we have to just pass our image file to this. So make sure you are just passing the image file, not a blob. And then at the end we have to just give a semicolon. So let me just give a semicolon. And once our image final file handle is created, the only thing that we have to do is we have to push this final file handle inside the array that we have created previously. So product images to file handle dot push, and we have to just push a final file handle. Now all these things, like make sure like whatever I have just done, I have just done every single thing inside a for loop, not outside a for loop. So make sure like you are just using all these things in a correct manner, because over here we have created a lot of objects with a similar name. So obviously there might be a confusion. So you can just pause the video, and maybe you can just check the code, but make sure you are just using every single thing in a correct manner, even for the data URI to blob function as well. So make sure you are just using every single thing in a correct manner. So now after the for loop, the only thing that we have left back is we have to assign this particular array to our original product object. So what we have to just do is we have to just use product dot product images is equals to product images to file handle like this, and at the end we have to just return the product like this. And now we are just done with this service, and every single thing which is needed inside the service is done. The next thing that we have to do is we have to call this particular service from our required component. So now let me just close this image processing service, and now let me just go back to the show product detail component.ts file. Inside this we have to just call this particular image processing service. So the next question might come, like, where we have to call this image processing service, right? Because we should call this image processing service at the correct place, otherwise it will not have any use. So over here we have to call this image processing service wherever we are getting the product details. So as of now, in my case, I'm just using this function like get all products to receive all the product details. So over here we are just receiving all the product details from the backend. So once we received it from the backend, then we have to just call the image processing service. So that is the correct time to call the image processing service. So now let me just show you how we can do this as well. So for this, first of all, let me just inject this service that we have just created. So let me just use private image processing service, then which is of type image processing service. Now inside my get all product function, I'm just going to use a map function, or maybe I'm just going to use a pipe, and inside the pipe I'm just going to use a map function. So before subscribing we have to just call a pipe. So pipe is nothing but a like, it is basically one, you can say that it will basically help you to execute some functions before subscribing to it. For example, map, filter. So it is basically comes from the RxJS library. So it basically provides lot of different information, a lot of different functions which you can use on the information or maybe on the observables, so that you can, like, if you want to perform any operations before subscribing to the observable, the pipe is the right way to do this. So now inside the pipe I'm just going to use one function that is called as a map. So for this map, what it will basically take is, it will basically take maybe one or two parameters. So let me just check. So yeah, so it takes two different parameters. It basically takes one value, then second one is an index. So first of all, let me just use the value. So value will be nothing but a x, you can give any name, and that value will be of type product. That value will be of type product array. So we have to use a brackets to define these. So let me just use a rounded brackets, and then we have to give the index as well, like this. So let me just give a index, and for the index I'm just using I, like this. And then we have to use a arrow, and now we have to give the function that we just want to use. So again we have to use a map. The reason is, this particular product is nothing but a array, but we want to perform the operation on every single element which is present into an array. So product array is nothing but, let's suppose if you have the 10 arrays, right? If you have the 10 different products, so this product array will contain 10 different elements. So we have to process images for every single product that is present into this array. So I think it is becoming a bit confusing, but as of now you can just type the code, and maybe once you read it, once you get the output, you will get to know every single thing. So next thing that we have to do is we have to just call x.map, and again we have to just use you can just give any name. So again I'm just using one bracket. Then for this I'm just using a product. Again it will be of type product, like this. And then we have to again use the arrow, and this dot image processing service dot create images, and this create images function will take the product like this. And now let me just save this code, and this is the pipe that we have to just add before subscribing to the product. So right now I have used two different maps over here. So the reason is, the first map will take entire array which is of the product array. The next map, it will take the only single element which is present into a array. So if you have some of the little bit of information on the pipe and map, then it will be very easy. Otherwise you can just type it and you can just leave it as it is. Maybe in some of the other sessions we will cover on the map and every single thing. Now let me just save this code, and now let me just restart my application. So let me just use npm run start, and now whenever we will click on the image button, show image button, then on the console you will see the difference, like whatever output previously we were getting and what is the exact output right now we are getting. So let me just quickly show you. Let me refresh it, and now let me just click on the images button. So now on the console, if you see, like rest of the things we are getting as it is, but if you see like product images, what we are going to what we are getting is, we are getting now file and we are getting its URL. So previously we were getting like picture bytes, then type, and then name, and then ID. But right now what we are getting the actual file and we are getting its URL. So this is basically done by this map and the image process service that we have just created. So all these things are done by this particular pipe and this function, create images function. So now we have done almost every single thing. The next thing that we have to do is, we have to just pass this information to the dialog, and then we have to show that images on a dialog. So this is basically very easy. So over here, let me just go back to the Google Chrome, and let me just close this tab or maybe console, and then let me just come back to this Angular material site. Let me just go back to the examples, and let me just go back to the examples that we were referring previously. So yes, injecting data when opening a dialog. So how we have to inject a data? So it is basically simple. We have to just use a data, and then we have to just use its key, and then we have to just use its value. So we have to use a data, then inside it we have to use its key, and then we have to use its value. So let me just try to use this similar thing. Let me just go to the show images function. Then let me just add one more parameter over here, which is a data, and then we have to use a curly bracket. Then we have to give a comma after the data as well. Then for the data, let me just use a key. So I will just use a key as images, which will be from product images like this. And now let me save it. Now the next thing that we have to do is, we are attaching images from the show product detail component, but on the dialog as well we have to receive those images. So from here we are sending it, but from the dialog we have to receive it. So for this, let me just go to the new component that we just created. So we have previously created component that show product image dialog. Let me just go to the TS file of it, and then over here let me just go to the Chrome, and let's see. So over here we have to first of all inject a dialog data. So let me just use public data, dialog data, and then over here we have to use this decorator as well, which is @inject. So let me just use in a similar way. So let me just go to the constructor. Let me just use public data, which will be of type mat dialog data. Mat dialog data. Let me just try to find it out, or let me just type it. Over here I am not able to find the mat dialog data. Yeah, it is a dialog data, not a mat dialog data. So let me just remove it, and let me just use dialog data. So dialog data also I am not able to find. Let's see. whether we have to import something. So over here, if you see, let me just copy this import line, and now let me just paste it inside my imports like this. And yes, now we have imported it successfully. And okay, let me just check why I'm getting the errors. Let me just copy the name, I think. Okay, so still I'm getting the error, so let me just check. Cannot find a name as a dialog data. So I think we have to do one more thing as well. So let me just use this particular decorator @inject mat dialog data like this. And for this inject, we have to just import like this. And now let me just save it. Now over here again, I'm not sure like why I'm just getting the error, so we can just see into that error later on. But first of all, let's move forward. And the next thing that we have to do is we have to just use one more thing. So we have to do one more function. So let me just use one function. Let's suppose receive images like this. And then let me just use console.log over here. And then let me just use a data. So I'm just printing this data as it is. Let's see what happens. And also we have to do one more thing, like we have to just check for the key as well. So over here in the example, they are using the key as a data. This data we are again using the same, and we must have to use the same. There is nothing to worry about. The key that we are interested in this, like animal. So over here they are using the animal, but now let's suppose if we are using something different, so we have to use that different name that we have used. So let me just go to the show product details dot component.ts file. Over here we are just using the images as a key, so we have to use data.images. So let me just go back, and over here we can just use this data.images like this. And now let me just save it, and let me just try to restart my application. And again we are getting the error. So let's see why I'm just getting the error. So now if I just go to the Google Chrome, over here if you see, like I just found out one mistake that I done. So I have used a dialog data. So I was thinking like it is a inbuilt like classes which is provided by the Angular material, but it is not kind of inbuilt class. So if you see, like they have created one interface for the dialog data. So that is the reason we were getting the error. But we don't have to create the interface for dialog data because we have previously created. So let me just use, instead of the dialog data, let me just use product, or maybe we can just use any array, because we are going to get one array. Or instead of the any as well, we can just use a file handle, because we are going to get array of an file handle. So we can just use it as an array of a file handle. So now it is done. And the next thing that it is giving is, like, it is giving me the error. So yes, obviously it will give me the error, because now directly we cannot access the images. So as of now, let me just print it as a this.data, and now let me just save this code. Now we have to call this receive images function from our ng on init. Let's see what we get. So we have to just call this dot receive images like this. And now let me just see whether my application is compiled or not. So let me just first of all start my application, and let's see what we get on the receive images. So we are just doing the console.log, and I'm expecting that it should print the images array, like whatever we are going to receive from the show product detail component. Now let me just open the console, and over here now let me just click on the images. So now as soon as I click on the images, I'm getting, first of all, first console is on from the show product detail component itself, but second console is from the model or dialog. So if you see, we are getting the images array, then we are getting zeroth index. Like as of now we have only one image, so that's the reason zeroth index. Then we are getting the file handle like file and URL. So as expected, we are getting every single thing. The next thing that we have to do is we have to just iterate over the array, and then we have to show images on this dialog. So for this, again, I'm just going to use the grid that we have used previously. So let me just use a grid list, and we have used the grid list previously to show the images preview. So that's the reason we don't have to import its module. But if you are using for the very first time, make sure you are just importing its module. So now let me just go to the overview, and I'm just going to use this basic grid. So we can just copy this grid code, and we can just come back to the VS Code, and then let me just open its HTML, like show product image dialog HTML, show product image dialog HTML. Let me just, first of all, I just opened a CSS, so we have to open the HTML. So let me just open its HTML, and now let me just first of all remove this entire default message, and let me just paste this particular code. And then over here for this matte grid tile, we have to use a ng for. So let me just keep only one and remove all these things, and then let me just use star ng for is equals to, and then what we have to just do is we have to just use this .data.file handle. So we have to just use this .data, and let me just use let file handle of data like this, and then we have to just use img src. So src will is nothing but like file handle dot url, and let me just save it. Now let's see what we are getting on the console. So now if I just click on it, I'm getting one error on the console. Let's see. So it is basically saying that cannot find a differ supporting object of type object. ng4 only supports binding to iterables such as arrays. So let's see what it is doing right now. So over here what we are doing is we are just trying to do ng4 on the data. So data is nothing but an array, so it should work fine. And then we are just using a file handle dot url. So let me just try to use a binding to the src like this, and now let me just save it. Now let's see what happens. So when we click on this, so still we are getting this. Let me just refresh this as well, and now let me just click on it, and still we are getting the same error. And now over here let me just see like what we are doing right now. So what we can just do is we can just try to debug this particular code to get what exactly we are doing over here. So first of all, I'm just doing the console.log. So yes, that is correct. On the console.log, what we are just doing is we are just getting the images. Yes, so I think we have to use these images. So we have to just use this .data.images. So let's try to do this .data.images like this, and now let me save it, and let's see now what we get. So let me just check whether my application started or not. So yes, on this I'm just getting the errors. So let's see again why I'm just getting the errors. So now to resolve this error, let me just do one thing. Let me just, instead of this file handle, let me just make it as an any array like this, and now let me just save it. So let's see again whether we are getting any error or not, because we have to just check it with the different types, because this error was unexpected, I think, and I'm just missing some types and everything. So that's the reason we are getting the error. And let me just remove this array as well, and let me just keep it as a any only. So now once we do any, I think we are not getting any error right now. And over here we are, what changes we have done is we have just made it as an any, and inside the HTML we have just used data.images. So previously we were just using data, but right now we are using data.images. So I think this should work perfectly fine, because I'm now just using the any data type. So now let me just start the application. Let's see whether do we get any error or not, and let's see if we are getting any error, we can resolve it. Otherwise I think we should not get any error right now. I'm expecting no any errors right now. So now application is compiled successfully. If we just go to the Chrome, and if we just refresh it, and if we just click on any images button, now we are able to see all the images, and these are looking really very nice. The only thing that we have left back is we have to just make it more beautiful, and we have to just apply some basic styles. I'm not going to apply the heavy styles, I'm just going to apply the basic styles, such as its product height and width. And then I'm just going to apply one border as well around these images, so that it will look more beautiful. So I'm just going to create the similar thing that we have done previously for the show image previews. So again we are just going to follow the same styles. The next thing that we have to do is we have to quickly go to the HTML, and over here if you see, like for this matte grid list, we have the row height as 2:1. Instead of 2:1 we can just make it as 1:1, and then columns we can just make it as a 4 columns like this. And let me save it. Let's see how it is currently looking. So let me just see. Yes, now it is looking bit good. Now we have to apply the styles to the images as well. So I'm just going to apply similar styles that we have done for the show image preview. So for this, let me just go to the add a new product component. Inside the add a new product component, let me just go back to this HTML file, and over here if you see, like uh, we have this image preview, division. If you see, for this image, like we have applied the width of 100 pixel, height of 100 pixel. So let me just do one thing. Let me just apply the same for my new component, like width of the 100 pixel and then height of the 100 pixel, like this. And now yes, it is looking quite beautiful. Yes, I think if you want you can just increase the size, but I think for me it's good, because as of now we have only one product image, but in some cases we might have 5 images, 10 images, right? So in that case, like if you have like height and width, big height and width, so in that case it will not look quite good. So that's the reason I'm just keeping it as minimum, not very minimum, but I'm just following the decent height and widths that we have used previously. And let me just apply some classes as well. So let me just see what are the classes that we have applied. So for the images we haven't applied any classes, but for a grid we have applied some classes. So let me just use for the CSS. Let's see what we have done. We have just applied a border, and for this border we have applied the color of a triple E, which is nothing but kind of a light gray. So similarly, let me just apply that as well. So you can just copy the same style, which is matte grid tile, and border is equals to 1 pixel solid, and color is equals to hash triple E. And now let me just copy paste this into the CSS of my show product image dialog component. Let me save it. Let me just check. So yeah, now it is looking quite good, and I think yes, now it is looking quite perfect actually. So you can just increase the height and width that if you want, and maybe let's try to increase it. Let's make it as a 150 and 150. Let's see. So let me just use the width of a 150 and height of a 150, like this, and let's see. Yeah, for 150 also it is looking good, and I think yeah, now it is decent one. So we can just go ahead with the 150, and obviously giving this height and width the same, it is not a good idea, because it will make our image kind of a like square image, and this is not a good idea. But as of now I have very few examples for the images, that's the reason I'm just using it. But in future, if I want, I can just change it to the something else, or maybe we can just apply few more styles as well. So if you want to apply few more styles, you can just obviously apply, and you can just go ahead with your styles. But as of now I'm just keeping it as it is. Just for a check, what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to add one new product. Let's suppose iPhone 12. Description is iPhone 12, and I'm just going to apply the actual price as 1 lakh rupees, discounted price as 1998,000. And then let me just apply some images as well. So let me just use these images. I'm just going to use a few images, like a few different kind of images. So let's see, 3, and I think one more we can use, and one more also we can use. Yes. So now let me just click on add product. Product is added. Let me just go to the show product details. So iPhone 12, yes, we are getting. Let me click on show images, and yes, now if you see that this is the thing that I was discussing previously. So if we can have multiple images in this case, so we can just have minimum height and width. So this is the case that I was talking about previously. So I think now we are getting a very good output from it, and we are now able to show all the images to the admin. So we have done this very important part, and many of the people were requesting in the comment section to for this particular part. So I hope you got an idea how we can convert our picture bytes into a file blob, and how we can show it to the admin. And I hope you enjoyed this session, and I'll see you in the next session.